Hey everyone, Nigel and Luke here, and welcome to another edition of Crimes of the Week International. Representatives from the Hong Kong police force say that they are searching for the culprit behind a strange burglary case this week, after an unknown suspect ransacked a local residence, then just abandoned a safe with thousands of dollars worth of valuables in it. The whole thing began shortly before 8 p.m. on April 27th, when Hong Kong police received a call from a person in the city's affluent Happy Valley residential area. The caller said that they believed a man had broken into one of their neighbors' apartments and that he had made off with a bunch of valuables. They said they'd followed him to a set of stairs near a children's park, but they didn't know where he'd gone after that. When police arrived, they confirmed that there had been a burglary at the place the caller had described. What they didn't expect to find, though, was a safe that had been stolen from the scene, simply dumped near that same children's park. Officers say that there was around 200,000 Hong Kong dollars worth of jewelry inside, worth the equivalent of roughly $26,000 US. It's not clear why the culprit left the safe or whether he planned to return later to retrieve it. At the time, he remains on the run and police are still in the process of trying to track him down and identify him. The man has been described only as being between the ages of 40 and 50 and about 5 feet 7 inches tall. He was apparently dressed in a blue shirt, dark pants, a black hat, and a mask at the time of the crime. Representatives from the UK's counter-terrorism policing agency say that they are investigating the aftermath of a chilling incident this week after a man allegedly went on a rampage with a crossbow, a crime that left 2 women injured and ended in the suspect's death. The whole thing began shortly after 2:45 p.m. on April 26th, when West Yorkshire police started receiving calls from concerned members of the public in the city of Leeds. Several people in the city's Headingley area said that they had seen a man walking around near a strip of local pubs and restaurants. Disturbingly, he was armed with a crossbow, as well as what appeared to be other weapons. When police arrived at the scene, they soon discovered that the situation was worse than anyone realized. 2 women had actually been shot at and wounded by the male suspect, who had since fled the scene. The victims were 19 and 31, and both of them were rushed to a nearby hospital. One of the women suffered life-threatening injuries, though thankfully, following surgery, she was said to be in stable condition. After launching a search, police found the suspected attacker about an 8-minute walk away at Beckett Park. The man, later identified as 38-year-old Owen Lawrence, was suffering from a self-inflicted wound to the head. He was also surrounded by weapons, including the crossbow allegedly used in the attack and an air rifle he reportedly used to shoot himself. Lawrence was taken to a hospital as well, though he was later pronounced dead from his injuries. While the situation is still very much under investigation at the time of this recording, what police have revealed so far is quite unsettling. Representatives from the UK's counter-terrorism policing say that they are now looking into a number of disturbing social media posts made by Lawrence leading up to the attack, in which he laid out the alleged motive behind the crime. In those posts, Lawrence reportedly detailed plans for what he called the Int'l Run massacre. The Int'l Run refers to a famous pub crawl route in Leeds consisting of more than a dozen local drinking spots. While it's not a formal event, the Int'l Run is well known in the area and is seen as a rite of passage amongst the city's university students. According to counter-terror officials, Lawrence wrote a horrifying Facebook post announcing the attack and his intended goals shortly before committing the violence. He described the Int'l Run massacre with terms such as, quote, spree killing, mass murder, terrorism, revenge, and misogynic rage. He also provided a lengthy list of intended targets, amongst them students, nightclub goers, neurotypicals, and police. According to authorities, Lawrence referenced the weapons he planned to use in the attack and stated that he had, quote, explored far-right ideologies. It appears he had a specific obsession and reverence for the 2019 Christchurch mosque shooter. He likewise seems to have expressed a number of grievances with women. Police say that in other social media posts made earlier this year, Lawrence wrote about hating, quote, gender equality, feminists of all 4 waves, and feminoids. At the time of this recording, officials say that they are still collecting and analyzing evidence related to the case, and that the situation is ongoing. Officials in Sweden say that 3 people are dead this week and that a teenage suspect is in custody following a disturbing shooting attack that is being investigated as a possible gang-related incident. The whole thing unfolded at around 5 p.m. on April 29th in the city of Uppsala, about 40 miles north of the capital of Stockholm. It began when police started receiving calls from concerned members of the public who said they'd heard a series of loud bangs near Uppsala Square in the center of the city. When officers arrived and began investigating, they quickly determined that the noises that had been reported were gunshots. Those gunshots were traced to a local barber shop where 3 young men were found dead. Further witness accounts provided police with information about the shooter, as another young man had been seen fleeing the area on an electric scooter. The following day, police revealed that they had arrested a 16-year-old suspect in connection with the case. The teen was reportedly taken into custody 2 hours after the shooting at his home and was allegedly in the middle of cleaning his clothes with bleach when authorities arrived. Unfortunately, right now, not much else has been revealed about the incident. We don't know the name of the 16-year-old suspect, nor have any of the victims been identified either. All we know about them is that they were between the ages of 15 and 20. That being said, a detail about one of the victims apparently caught the attention of detectives. According to police, the victim had previously been investigated in connection with a planned attack against the relatives of a well-known gang leader named Ismail Abdo. Though the victim was never charged in that case, it seems that this has led authorities to consider the possibility that this is a gang-related incident. However, so far it seems police are remaining relatively tight-lipped about the whole thing, and have declined to confirm many details related to the triple shooting. As we've spoken about in the past on this series, Sweden has had an ongoing problem with gang violence over the last several years. Sadly, many of these crimes involve minors who are recruited specifically by these illicit organizations because they are under the age where they can be held criminally responsible for their actions. This has resulted in increasing calls by many citizens for the government to act, and it seems that officials are entertaining some pretty big efforts to crack down on the issue. According to reports, the Swedish government recently proposed new legislation that would allow police to wiretap children under the age of 15. They have also stated that they are considering tightening the country's gun laws. At the time of this recording, this week's shooting is still under investigation, and police say more arrests could follow. Authorities in the German city of Hamburg say that they were investigating a disturbing crime after a best-selling author was found murdered on her houseboat last week under mysterious circumstances. The whole thing began shortly before 5:30 a.m. on April 22nd, when emergency responders were called about Alexandra Fröhlich. The 58-year-old author had been found unresponsive by one of her sons aboard her iconic pink houseboat, which was docked along the Elbe River in the city's Moorfleet district. When help arrived, they confirmed that sadly Alexandra was dead. However, things quickly became much darker when police noticed that there were signs of violence at the scene. That's when the case officially became a murder investigation. Unfortunately, it seems that so far, police are remaining very quiet about the situation and have refused to confirm much about the alleged killing. This has led to confusion about some of the details of the case. For example, initially it was reported that Alexandra had been shot. However, the latest available reports say that she died of blunt force trauma. This change is especially confusing because earlier details that were released also appeared to suggest the involvement of a firearm. This includes a witness who claimed that they had heard a gunshot around 1:30 a.m. on the morning that Alexandra was found. On top of this, police divers were seen searching the river around the 58-year-old's boat, and several of her family members were reportedly tested for gunshot residue. Because of the lack of information, it's not clear what, if any, progress has currently been made, nor if there are any real suspects. All we know is that Alexandra had only moved into the houseboat where the crime took place approximately 6 months before she was killed. According to German media, the 58-year-old was a well-known and celebrated author who had written best-selling books. Before becoming a full-time novelist, she had a career in journalism and had also worked as a copy editor for several women's magazines. At the time of this recording, the mysterious case is still under investigation, and we'll be sure to update you as new developments are released. Authorities in the South Korean capital of Seoul say that a woman is dead this week and another was seriously injured following a terrifying broad daylight stabbing attack at a supermarket. The whole thing unfolded shortly before 6:30 p.m. on April 22nd at the store in question, which is located in Seoul's Gangbuk district. According to reports, the suspect, identified only as a 33-year-old man, casually walked into the business and began chugging back a bottle of soju, the iconic Korean alcoholic beverage. He then proceeded to pull a knife off of one of the store's shelves and remove it from its packaging. Moments later, he began attacking people at random. While it appears that most people quickly realized what was happening and ran for their lives, the two female victims weren't so lucky. Identified only as a customer in her 60s and an employee in her 40s, the women were repeatedly stabbed in the back and slashed at by the unhinged attacker. Both were later rushed to a hospital, though sadly, the woman in her 60s went into cardiac arrest and was later pronounced dead. Despite the extremely violent nature of the incident, according to witnesses, the unidentified suspect seemed completely calm and unfazed the entire time. After the stabbing rampage, he made no attempt to flee. In fact, he walked outside and called police himself. Before being arrested, his only request that he be allowed to finish his cigarette. As if that isn't strange enough, local media sources have reported that just hours before all of this, the 33-year-old suspect had been receiving treatment at a nearby hospital. The man had shown up complaining of an injury to his finger and said that he had hurt it while stumbling around drunk. In images released this week, taken by surveillance cameras at the crime scene, the man can be seen still wearing his hospital clothes after the stabbing attack. Officials from the hospital said that the man had not reported suffering from any mental health issues while receiving treatment, and that they really didn't know much about him because he hadn't been there that long. Following his first court appearance this week, the 33-year-old apologized to his victims, claiming that the attack was not premeditated. He told reporters, quote, "I'll never do something like this again." At the time of this recording, authorities say that the man remains in custody and that they are awaiting the results of psychiatric and toxicology testing. Authorities in Taiwan say that what started out as a serious investigation this week into a potential shooting transformed into something a lot stranger after the alleged culprit was tracked down and explained the real reason for his actions. The whole thing began on April 17th, when police in Hualien County received a call from a worried resident by the last name of Lo. Lo said that he'd made an alarming discovery. He was pretty sure someone had been shooting at his home in Ji'an township. When officers arrived, Lo showed them the evidence for his claims. 2 of his pet pigeons had been hit and killed by some type of projectile. Surveillance camera footage confirmed this. It showed a man who appeared to be armed with a rifle shooting in the direction of the 70-year-old's house. While this was understandably concerning, things took a turn after police tracked down the alleged shooter, another local resident in his 70s by the last name of Lin. That's when Lin explained what he had really been doing that day. According to him, he had no grudge against Lo or any of his other neighbors for that matter. Instead, he said that the pigeons were his intended targets all along. He wanted to kill the birds so that he could eat them. Lin said he shot the pigeons after they had been released from Lo's enclosure and were perched on a telephone pole outside his house. But after being hit, the birds had fallen onto Lo's roof, so there was no way for him to retrieve them. After that, he just gave up and went home. Though Lin's weapon was just an air rifle and was totally legal, needless to say, authorities were not impressed with how he'd used the gun, or the fact that he'd done so in such a reckless way. As a result, he was arrested for public endangerment and causing property damage. Officials in the French city of Nantes say that they are investigating an awful tragedy this week after a teenage boy allegedly carried out a horrifying knife attack at his high school, a crime which left 1 person dead and 3 others injured. The whole thing unfolded shortly before 12:30 p.m. on April 24th at Notre-Dame de Toutes Aides, an affluent private Catholic high school. It began when a 10th grade student at the school, identified only as 16-year-old Justin P., came out of a bathroom on the building's 2nd floor. Moments earlier, he had changed into an outfit consisting of dark pants, safety shoes, glasses, a balaclava, and a helmet. He was also armed with 2 knives. After apparently searching around a bit, Justin found a fellow student he had been looking for, a 15-year-old girl identified only by the name Lorraine. After approaching her, he unleashed an absolutely vicious attack. According to local media sources, Lorraine was stabbed a staggering 57 times. Most of the wounds were to her upper body and head, and the assault continued well after she fell to the ground. Sadly, it appears she never had a chance to defend herself, and would die from her injuries before help could arrive. As awful as this already was, unfortunately the situation was far from over. Over approximately the next 20 minutes, Justin would go on to attack 3 of his other fellow students, another teenage girl, and 2 15-year-old boys. In terms of why the attack went on so long, it's not exactly clear, though some sources seem to suggest that the stabbings happened in different parts of the school. What we do know, though, is that the carnage only came to an end after the intervention of some brave teachers, who forcefully confronted Justin and managed to restrain him until police could arrive. As I mentioned before, tragically, the first victim, Lorraine, was pronounced dead after authorities responded to the scene. However, the other victims were able to be saved. They were taken to local hospitals, with at least one of them suffering life-threatening injuries at the time. In terms of how and why this all happened, that's something that's still very much being investigated at this time. But according to information shared by both police and French media outlets, it seems that the crime was both targeted and premeditated. It's believed that Justin arrived at the school that day with all of the weapons and other items he planned to use in the attack. Some of these supplies, including a replica handgun, were apparently found in his backpack, which he had left in that bathroom on the 2nd floor. It said that the 16-year-old attended his classes like any other day that morning, before getting ready during his lunch. Right before attacking the first victim, he sent out an email to the entire school that reportedly contained a 13-page manifesto he claimed he had written. The exact details of that supposed manifesto are unclear, but in it, the teen apparently expressed a range of frustrations with society. However, it seems that authorities are still skeptical as to whether Justin actually wrote the document or whether he plagiarized it from elsewhere online. What police are likewise trying to understand is why he allegedly targeted Lorraine. According to students at the school, Justin was a loner with very few, if any, friends. Several told investigators that Lorraine was one of the only people that he seemed to get along with, and who was nice to him and spoke with him regularly. At the time of this recording, Justin P. remains in custody, though has been placed in a psychiatric unit for evaluation. The situation is still developing. The friends and family members of a murdered Australian teenager are demanding change this week, more than a month after she was viciously killed on her way home from a night out with friends by a perpetrator with a lengthy history of violence against women. The case began more than a month ago on March 23rd, when 19-year-old Audrey Griffin was reported missing by worried loved ones. The night before, the popular and athletic teen had been out enjoying herself at a local bar in the city of Gosford, in New South Wales' Central Coast area. She had left shortly after 2 a.m. and began walking back to her father's place in Terrigal after she wasn't able to get an Uber. In the beginning, she had stayed in touch with the people she was with, and it seems that they believed she had made it home. Sadly, though, it turned out that wasn't the case. That afternoon, friends and family members began looking for Audrey, and they were able to find the last place her cell phone had pinged, a wooded area called Arana Creek. After stumbling across Audrey's purse, they called police. Everyone's worst fears were confirmed a short time later when Audrey's body was found floating in the shallow waters of the creek. After conducting an autopsy, it was determined that Audrey's cause of death was drowning. However, despite what we now know were signs of violence to her body, authorities bizarrely concluded that the case was not suspicious. Over the next few weeks, they would go on to double down on this assertion, only for everything to abruptly change last week. On April 21st, it was announced that a 53-year-old man, Adrian Torrens, had been arrested for Audrey's murder. According to local news sources, the radical shift in the case came after a mounting pile of evidence finally convinced police that they were wrong. Among this evidence was CCTV video of Torrens, which reportedly shows him following Audrey on the morning of the murder. Additionally, Torrens' DNA was allegedly found under Audrey's fingernails. Cell phone data placed him at the scene where her body was found, and he also made a series of chilling confessions to acquaintances in the days and weeks following the killing. It's now believed that on the morning of Audrey's murder, Torrens stalked and attacked her as she was on her way home. It's thought that after beating her unconscious, he held her head underwater until she was dead. As awful as all of that already is, the situation gets far more upsetting. You see, according to reports, Adrian Torrens had a track record of violence against women long before this. In addition to abuse convictions against multiple former partners, the 53-year-old had a history of breaching protection orders against his victims. Despite this, when he recently pleaded guilty in connection with one of these incidents, he was spared jail time and instead was given an 18-month community correction order. This was apparently the reason he was free to commit Audrey's murder. Though Torrens did not know Audrey prior to the killing, her friends and family still understandably see her as being failed by the system, particularly by the lack of enforcement of anti-domestic violence laws. In the wake of these revelations, vigils have been held for Audrey calling for change and accountability from the government and law enforcement. Unfortunately, while the case against Torrens appeared to be strong, he will not ever face prison time for his actions. That's because 3 days after he was taken into custody, he was found unresponsive in his jail cell. The 53-year-old had allegedly taken his own life and was pronounced dead on April 24th. The circumstances surrounding this are still being investigated, as is Audrey's case overall. Her loved ones say that the news of Adrian Torrens' death is bittersweet, but in the meantime, they will keep fighting for justice for Audrey and for the many other victims of domestic violence. Before we wrap up, we'd like to take a second to give a huge shout out to everyone who has made it this far into the video. Seriously, thank you so much for watching. If you found today's upload interesting and informative, we'd be honored if you consider liking and subscribing, as well as hitting the notification bell and selecting all notifications to stay up to date with our latest releases. If you're looking for additional ways to help support the channel, we'd love to have you join us over on Patreon. Patrons get ad-free and early access to all of our content, as well as 4 additional stories per week for each of our Crimes of the Week and Crimes of the Week International videos. You can learn more at patreon.com/crimezone, where you'll also find some of the fine folks whose names are currently on screen. All that being said, we understand that not everyone has the means to support financially, and that's totally okay. We appreciate every like, sub, share, and comment that you send our way. Once again, thanks so much everyone, and take care.